Hey everyone, welcome back to the Phase podcast. It's a brand new school year and we're back here with a fresh season. Season 3 is going to be called the Wellbeing Wave, where in each episode we're going to dive deep into something topical around well-being and resilience. In today's episode, I'm going to be exploring something super relevant. How do you adapt well to a new environment? I'm sure some of you will have recently moved schools or be perhaps moving to university in the coming month or so. I am very fortunate to be joined by a special guest who is going to help me explore today's topic. Hello, Kirstie. It's great to have you on the podcast today. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself? What do you do in the daytime? Maybe what are your hobbies and even a fun fact?
Hi everyone, I'm Kirstie and I am a youth and children's worker at Christchurch in Hitchin. I guess a hobby of mine, something that I'm really into at the moment, is going to the gym. I love the gym, lifting weights, spin classes and swimming, the whole lot. So that's a hobby of mine. A fun fact, this makes everyone kind of laugh, but I'm actually a qualified nail technician in my spare time occasionally.
That's a really cool fun fact. So youth worker with a side hustle of qualified nail technician. And you also have a hobby that we both share. You love going to the gym and exercise is a big part of your life, I know. So today we're talking about adapting well to a new environment. And this is actually something you have got a lot of experience of, isn't it, Kirstie? So tell us about a time that you've moved in the past. What made you decide to move to a new place? And what were some of the emotions you were feeling around that time as well?
So I moved from my parents' house, where obviously I've lived all my life. And I moved up here to Hitchin about 2 and a bit years ago. I moved here for a job. I finished uni during COVID and then I was looking for a job as a youth worker in a church. And I was just scrolling the internet and I found a job here in Hitchin. It's been an experience. I guess you could say like a bit about the move was moving from somewhere I knew really well and felt very comfortable to somewhere where I knew nobody. And there was nothing in place. You know, like when you move to university, it's like I went to uni and you move there and kind of you meet people who are maybe like on your course or you have shared interests or whatever, and you're in an environment where you have to get to know people. Like there's so many people around you. Whereas just moving somewhere for work is a whole other experience.
Yeah, it's very true, isn't it? It's like as an adult, there are fewer and fewer natural opportunities to meet people who are like-minded to you. What was maybe some of the positive emotions you felt at the time? Did you feel any sense of excitement? How were you feeling about the opportunity of moving to a new place?
I was really excited. I was excited to be able to do a job that, you know, I love and, you know, I spent 3 years training for it. And I could finally use my skills and all those things, but also just be able to have like a positive impact on children and young people within church, outside of church. I was really excited about that. And I think almost that excitement of a new place, like new things going on. And I think I loved the fact that no one knew me, like no one knew my past or whatever. And I could just start afresh. I was excited for that, to see where that would take me and the opportunities that would give me doing things afresh.
It's really cool. So I guess some young people that have just moved to a new place, to a new school recently will probably share some pretty similar feelings to what you felt before you moved. Maybe that feeling of fear or loneliness, if particularly they're going to a school where they don't know anyone. But also maybe that excitement of being ready to step up. Like you said, you were ready to become a youth worker. And maybe some of those young people are feeling like they're ready for that next step, moving up to secondary school or whether they're moving school because they're moving to a new place. So it's really cool that you've kind of shared some of that similar stuff. And I'm sure just like young people will be, they'd have done a lot of research about a new school they're moving to. Did you do any research about Hitchin? What did you find out before you moved to Hitchin?
So I'm not a very good forward planner sometimes. I actually didn't research anywhere. I think the only bit of research I did was I sat with some friends after church in the pub, and we were looking at like what local churches there were around that had like people my age in it. That was the only bit of research I did to find a church to go to make friends and to meet people my age. That was probably the only bit of research.
That's really interesting though, because it kind of links to that. One thing that was causing you maybe fear or anxiety about the move was loneliness. And so the bit of research that you did do was, where can I go to find my people? And so I guess for young people in a similar situation, like where is that place at their new school? Where can they go to find community? It might be like an after school club or something like that. I think that's cool. That's really good insight. What was it like when you first moved to Hitchin? Did you feel like you had to completely throw all your habits and rhythms out the window? Or did you try and keep as much of you and what you do on a day-to-day basis the same, even in a new environment? How did you find that?
So like I was saying earlier, for me, it was like a complete fresh start. So I had my ways of doing things back home and my routines and stuff. And for there, they served their purpose. They were great. But moving here for me was a real new opportunity to do life on my own and figure out how I like to do things. So that my parents hovering over me or whatever, like this was me, and I could do what I want kind of when I wanted. Like I said, like I go to the gym. So very much finding that routine for me. How did that fit into my daily schedule? And that was a big change. I've been someone that's always gone with people to the gym. I now rock up by myself.
Which is quite a big change, isn't it, right?
Yeah. Getting used to training by yourself is interesting. I still do it now. And actually, for me, that's a really good thing. So finding that routine of doing that, and probably how I fill my time and how I conduct myself. You know, I don't have to tell my mum where I'm going every 5 minutes. I can very much do things when I want. That's a great thing. But then at the same time, it's like, actually, like, what's sensible, what's not sensible, you know. I'm not someone that's out until 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm in bed by like 9. And that being okay, and no one looking at me being like, but Kirstie, you're always out until goodness knows what time. So yeah, it probably changed quite a bit. And I would say for the better, just figuring out who I am and what fits me and being okay with that.
So I guess the big things I took from that was, you're not changing who you are, but you're becoming more independent. You're not changing what you do, but you do those things more independently. And what's really cool about that is, I guess, as we move environments, as we go throughout life, almost all of those moves tend to like give us more independence. You spoke about early when you moved away to university. I'm sure that was another stage of gaining more independence. And I'm sure young people will find as well, if they're moving up to secondary school, it's like as you move between those new environments, those different environments, as you're growing up and getting older and becoming a young adult and eventually going into work, it's almost like every time you go to those new environments, you're still doing the same things, and maybe you're having to learn to do them slightly differently and maybe more independently, which is actually really cool because it's a part of growing and learning more about yourself, as I'm sure you probably found when you were starting to do those things independently of maybe other people, kind of like going to the gym by yourself.
Welcome to Spotlight Stories. In this, we want to take a moment to look at some recent news articles that might be of interest to you as a parent or even a professional that works with young people. In this episode of Spotlight Stories, we are thinking around mobile phone usage and how many schools are moving to banning the use of mobile phones for young people. Just last week, there was an article on the BBC where it talked about the Ormiston Academies Trust had confirmed that all 42 schools that they run will no longer allow pupils to bring mobile phones in. Here in Hitchin, most of the schools don't allow use of phones. One school has just introduced yonder pouches, which means young people can bring their phones in, but they put their phone in a pouch that is then locked and they're unable to access it until the end of the day. And as I read these articles, it brings up a lot of questions. Do you find that when you don't have access to your phone, does it help you concentrate more? Perhaps you're a bit like me and you find yourself just checking your phone even though it's not buzzed because it's such a habit of doing so. How can not having your phone around aid concentration? For me personally, I find that when I need to concentrate, I'll either put my phone on Do Not Disturb and turn it over so that I can't see the screen of it, or even often set timers so I can focus on things, because I know that if my phone pings or buzzes, then that can interrupt my workflow. We'd be interested to know, what's your experience of managing your phone use, or perhaps even managing the phone use of the teenager that maybe lives with you or that you work with? What have you found most useful? What have you found most challenging? We'd love you to connect with us on our social media. You can find us at Face Hitching on Facebook, Instagram, X and TikTok. We'd love to hear your comments around what you found most useful and challenging when it comes to mobile phone usage and young people.
It might be quite a difficult question. Do you still miss anything about your old environment? And if so, how do you manage that?
So some people think that's a hard question to answer, but for me, I really don't miss anything. I was in a strange position in terms of like, I'd already been to uni, so I'd already moved away.
Yeah.
And I had to move back for COVID. And so moving away again, I hadn't really established new relationships or anything back home. And a lot of my friends had, when we'd all moved to uni, they'd moved and they hadn't come back. So I guess for me, like the one thing I miss is my family. Love my family, but joys of FaceTime. So that's probably the only thing I miss.
Yeah.
I think other than that, for me, moving was a really good thing to happen. So
like with FaceTime there, it's almost like even when you're moving to a new place and there's obviously family is the big thing for you that you miss from your old environment. With FaceTime, you can still kind of just take a little part of that with you. Like obviously you can't see your family in person daily, but you can still keep up with them every day on WhatsApp, or as you say, maybe have longer catch-ups over FaceTime quite regularly as well. So you can take that little part of where you were before with you that you missed. So that's really cool. What are the biggest lessons you feel like you've learned from moving to a new place?
I think that the main one for me was learning patience. I think I was so excited to move and I was so ready for a fresh start. And when you see things like that happen in like the movies and stuff, it's almost like instantly they walk in and like they find their people and all these great things happen for them. And I love movies like that. But I think for me, like I had to learn patience, that actually it was going to take me time to find my routine and find my people. And I was probably still sat there a year into being up here and like, oh, I don't really know if I've made any friends, and I was questioning things. And actually I sit here now 2 years on and I'm like, I've got such a good group of friends and it's
really cool.
Yeah, it's great. And I think for me, I expected everything to happen instantly and it didn't. I really had to learn patience, that it takes time. I mean, it always takes time to make friends, but
that's a really big lesson that anyone can take.
It
does take time. It takes time to get to know people.
Yeah, like it's not an instant, like you walk into a room and there are your people. Those expectations that people fill your minds with is something that like there's a lot of pressure. You know, I remember expectations of moving to university that people had, and expectations of moving up here that really made me think I wasn't doing things quick enough, and it wasn't moving at the rate everyone else wanted my life to move at. And I really had to learn patience, that it's gonna take me some time. And that's probably like my biggest lesson, was just learning patience with everything. I'd probably say my second one is, it sounds really cliche, but to ask questions. I was that person in the classroom that hated asking questions, hated the attention, like it was the worst thing ever. But as I've grown up, like you learn that you need to ask questions for things.
Yeah, definitely.
And like I ask questions for like work, and I'm always figuring out how can I learn more things, how can I improve my job, and that means I have to ask people questions, and that's a big thing out of my comfort zone.
There's always more opportunities to learn from people as well as you're stepping up, because I suppose the thing about moving to a new environment is there's people in that environment that have been there for a long time, that know more than you. So I think that's such a big lesson that you learn to ask people when you need help.
And I think like alongside that this is like for those people that maybe like move to uni and a new place, like directions and asking for postcodes is perfectly fine. I am always glued to my sat nav on my phone because We're 2 years in and I still don't know where I'm going sometimes. But, those questions, people expect you to know, oh yeah, like, is such and such a place? And you're sat there going, what? Where is that? Like, yeah, so asking questions, not being afraid to admit that you don't know something or you just need some reassurance.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we've got patience, which I think is an amazing, really important top tip, particularly in our day and age of instant gratification and social media and everything. Everybody wanting everything straight away. I think that's a really good top tip, particularly when you're facing, like, moving places is such a big change, probably one of the biggest changes you'll ever face. And so being patient with yourself in that is so important. We've got asking questions, which is obviously really important so you can grow and learn from other people in that new space. And do you have a final top tip for us?
I think for me, it was to find something that brings you joy or like happiness. I think when you're moving to a new place or even just moving up to secondary school, it can be a lot. And it's almost like everything feels really kind of heavy and maybe there's some negative stuff thrown in there. And I think finding that space that brings you joy. So for me, it was going to the gym. Like, that was really good for me. That was my time to, like, clear my head or whatever. But, like, it could be finding, like, a club.
Yeah.
If you're a footballer or a rugby player or tennis player or whatever, finding that thing that brings you joy, if that's sport, or like a social group. There's so many random clubs out there. And at uni, there's so many different options and things. But finding that thing, or maybe it's a place, like, maybe it's a certain coffee shop that you find and you're like,
there's plenty of them in Hitchin.
I know. So maybe it's finding your favorite place where when you go to that place, you just kind of, you feel happy there, like, feel good. And I think that's probably a big one. I think it can get a lot. And just to find that thing that just, when you go there or when you play that sport, like, that's your time of everything's going to be okay. Like, you find that joy and that happiness.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of what we spoke about earlier, and it's like that little piece of home that you're taking with you. It's like, even though you're moving to a new place, those things that you love, maybe it's a sport or maybe it's just drinking coffee, those things don't necessarily change. And so finding ways to keep that big part of you in that new space is really, really important. So that's a wrap on today's Wellbeing Wave and the first episode of a brand new season of the Phase podcast. We're all really grateful for Kirstie's insights, as I'm sure our listeners are as well. So thank you so much, Kirstie, for sharing all of your experience and what you've learned about moving and adapting well to a new environment with us. If you enjoyed today's episode of the Phase podcast, make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcast from, as you want to make sure that you catch all of our Wellbeing Waves. Also, rate the podcast, as that really supports us and enables this content to reach more people. Finally, follow us on social media. You can find us at Phase Hitchin on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram and Facebook. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next episode.